Hey guys, welcome to this first video in a series of videos on Russia. And today we're going to be looking at how to approach the 25 marker for Russia. Now, this will not be the only one I make for this for the Russia 25 marker, but crucially, this is how you should be approaching it in the early stages of year 12. So let's start then by just thinking about what makes a good answer. And I'll just jot down on the screen some of the key ingredients. So the first thing our essay should start with is an introduction. And in the introduction, we should be defining our key terms in the question. And we should then also be outlining our three factors and what our overall position is. Okay. And when you see me write the answer in a second, you'll see that I'll break down each factor and what I'm saying for each one. We then have our main body. So our main body paragraphs. And these need to be on three different themes. Okay. So we need to make sure that we are including three different themes. And then within each paragraph, we should be starting by introducing the theme. We then want to, after we've done that, we then need to give an example of both czars and communists. We should then be trying to include synthesis when we give our examples. Okay, so we don't just want to just start listing evidence. We need to have some kind of comparative point. And in your answer, there should be 2 to 3 points of synthesis in total. Okay, and again, you'll see this in a second. And then finally, we then have the explanation of the comparison. Okay, after we've done that, we then repeat, but just for a different point of synthesis with different pieces of evidence. Now, if this is not making sense, it will hopefully make a bit more sense when I actually start to write it and annotate. Okay, but that's basically what we need to do. And then at the at the end of the paragraph, we have our analysis or mini conclusion, which is basically where we link back to our overall argument. And we try to consider counters. Okay, so the key thing here is I'll highlight it here. So we want to be giving 2 to 3 points of comparison when we're writing our answer. All right, and then at the end of the answer, we then include a conclusion. Okay, and the conclusion should state our opinion and should recap how we got to this judgment. Okay, so that is basically how or what makes a good answer. Those are the ingredients. Now, what we need to do is we need to look at the question. So if you see me looking up, it's not because I am, it's just because I've got all my notes on the slide. So this is the question that we are doing today. So to what extent did the style of government remain consistent between Russian rulers 1855, 1964, 25 marks? Okay, so the first thing I do when I have a question is I need to highlight, first of all, the focus of the question. So the question is asking us to focus on the style of government and then crucially consistent. Now, the style of government, based on what you studied so far, we can measure that in three ways, okay? And our three ways will be ideology, central government, and local government. Now, in about 4 or 5 lessons time, you'll be able to do way more different ways of measuring that. Okay, so you won't necessarily go for those same three factors, but at this stage, the majority of us are only comfortable with those three. Okay, and then the focus of the question, or the word that we have to use in our explanation, is the word consistent. Okay, so that's something that we need to be constantly referring back to when we are doing our answer. Okay, with that being said, then I'm going to jump straight into writing the answer, and I'm going to just talk you through as I'm going, and I'll highlight on the screen the different parts I'm doing. So the introduction, if we look back, this is what makes a strong introduction. So we should be defining the key terms in the question, outlining our three factors, and then introducing our overall position. So it might go something like this. So I might say something like the style of government can be defined as, can be defined as, or let's say, can be broken down into three different aspects. The ideology, followed by leaders, the design and nature of central government, and lastly, the structure of local government, something like that. Okay, so I'm introducing my three key themes, which are the constituent parts of style of government. I then need to say what my argument's going to be. So I'm going to say when considering, when considering these three aspects of Russian society, it becomes clear. Now, this is what my argument's going to be. You don't have to agree with this argument. This is what it's going to be. So it becomes clear that ideology remained generally consistent. All rulers between 1855 and 1964 followed or strove for a society based on centralized power. Okay, strove for a society based on centralized power and the removal of opposition. Oh, why do I keep seeing that? There we go. Okay. So I'm saying that's a point of similarity. I then need to say something about the other part. So I'm going to say something like, however, 1917 marked a significant turning point. Now, the reason why I'm using 1917 is that's the point when the communists come into power. So 1917 marked a significant turning point, and there were massive changes in the layout of central and local government in Russia. Okay, so then I'm saying, therefore, the style of government can only be said to have remained consistent ideologically, or in the case. So crucially, this is what I'm doing. Here is my definition of key terms in red. I'm then identifying my argument in green. So I'm saying ideology became generally consistent, but notice how I am then differentiating. Okay, so this style of argument is known as differentiating by factor. Okay, so this is where you give a different argument depending upon the factor, and that's what is called a sophisticated argument. So we want to be taking a differentiation by factor approach to this question, and that will be applicable for most 25 markers in the Russia side, as well as your other A-level papers as well. And then I've said the style of government can only be said to remain consistent in the case of ideology. So again, I'm reinforcing the argument that I've said up here. Okay, so the bit here, I'm reinforcing them. Right, then we'll jump into paragraph 1. So I'm going to start by saying there was clear consistency when it came to the ideologies followed by Russian rulers between 1855 and 1964. Okay, the Tsars all strongly believed in an autocracy, and I need to define what autocracy is. So I'm going to say which is where power was concentrated in one person's hands. Okay, something like that. And then what I want to do is I want to say here. In having authority and control. Democracy. Let's concentrate in one person's hands. And then I'm going to give an example. So I'm going to say under Nicholas II, his advisor, and he always spells his name wrong, Konstantin Pobedinostev, articulated that Nicholas's autocracy relied on 3 strands: total obedience, a paternalistic relationship between Tsar and people, and that opposition could not be tolerated anywhere. Sorry, just see my plan. Anywhere, tolerated in a country as vast as Russia. Okay, so that is specific evidence because I've name dropped Konstantin Pobedinostev. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to use some kind of synthesis. So I'm then going to try and do a comparison. Now, if you don't know what synthesis means, it means when I'm doing comparative connectives, okay? So this is my comparison. So this is my synthesis. I'm then going to say these same sentiments were echoed in Stalin's rule in which he developed the ideology of Stalinism, which sought to create a totalitarian rule over Russia, which was so just like Nicholas II, Stalin demanded complete obedience from his people, from the people, from the people, from the people. In particular, he believed, no, in particular, he achieved this through the creation of a command economy, in which he had full control over the means of production and the introduction of the Gulag, which dealt with any forms of opposition. Okay, so that's basically my first bit of synthesis. Okay, I might also say the fact that he also styles himself as the leader, so as the father of Russia, as part of his cult of personality. Oh no. Right, there we go. So that's my first point of synthesis. I'm now going to move into my second point. Okay. No, I'm not going to do that. So at the moment, I have done the following things. So I've done that first bit, so that bit there. I now need to explain. So I'm then going to say this, therefore, demonstrates consistency as let's go as both Nicholas and Stalin believed in complete power, but at the same time wanted to appear as if they had the people's best interests at. Okay. So let me just pause there. So at the moment, we have got in red, we have a clear point sentence, and notice how I am introducing my argument as well. I then give my first point of synthesis, which is going to be in green. So all synthesis is going to be in green. I then give my evidence. So this is in blue. I then have a bit more synthesis here. So I'm then going to use that. Then go back to blue for this bit. Then this is synthesis again. So notice the connectives. So basically every time you use a comparative connective, that is a form of synthesis. Then we've got more evidence here. And then we've got explanation here, which I'll do a nice purple for. Okay. Right. So then we'll move into the second point. So then I'm going to then move into Alexander the Third for a bit. The autocratic rule was also seen in the reign of Alexander the Third, where autocratic rule was also in the reign of Alexander III, where he introduced the Statute of State Security in 1881, which allowed him to remove all the allowed to remove all forms of political opposition. Although they did not follow autocracy, communists also believed in or followed similar principles. And it is in this sense that they can be seen as red czars. They followed Marxist, Leninist principles of democratic centralism, which argued that the power should reside. So let me see what I put. Solely in a small group of revolutionaries who would rule Russia dictatorially. Like Alexander III, they refused to share power with anyone else in the country. So then I now need to explain. So I've done some more evidence. So then you say, I've done some more evidence and synthesis. So then you say, therefore means the style of government remain consistent because all rulers in Russia sought to bolster, no, not that, concentrate power to have full control over society. They also um, all believed they were the rightful rulers of Russia and that opposition to them would not be tolerated. I then need to, so now I've done our highlights. So again, I've done my evidence here. So in green, and then I've done some synthesis here. And then I've then done this in blue. And then we've got more synthesis here. And then I've then got, this is evidence. And then this bit is explanation. Okay. Right, and now I need to move into my analysis. So I'm going to do this in a goldish color. So I'm going to then say, I need to consider, probably try and consider a counter argument and then link back to my overall argument. Okay, so it might look something like this. So they might say, so we'll go with, although autocracy does rely on the idea that the Tsar should take a fatherly role, protect his civilians, and was therefore different to dictatorship. The essence of the ideology was similar to the Marxist Leninist principle of desire to centralize power, the vanguard of the proletariat. Therefore, there is clear consistency in terms of the ideologies followed by Russian rulers during this period. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So in terms of what I've got then, so I have in red, I have my point sentence and arguments. I then have in blue is all my examples. Notice how detailed the examples are. I then have green is points of comparison and synthesis. Admittedly, in this paragraph, I could have made the points of comparison clearer. So for example, here, this is quite good, this bit here. Sorry, this part here is quite clear, but then I don't have another point of comparison in the next one. So I should have put a point of comparison in around this part here. So I should have basically fleshed out the fact that they both are focused on removing forms of opposition. But that's an example of how even at A level, like we make mistakes as well. So purple, we then have is explanation, and then this nasty gold color is analysis. Okay, so that's basically, I'm not going to do that for each paragraph. I'm only going to just highlight my points of synthesis and my analysis on the future ones. But that's basically what the paragraphs look like broken down. Okay, right, we're now on to paragraph 2. And this time I'm going to go into central government. Okay, so I'm now changing my argument. So I'm then going to say, however, there was clearly less consistency when considering the nature of central government in Russia 1855 to 1964. In the pre, so I would start by, I'd probably do here, firstly, there was, the Tsar was the sole power flowed solely through the Tsar, which was not the same in, whereas power was shared in communist Russia. Okay, so now I'll say in the pre-1905 period, the Tsar was situated at the center of a web of 5 different of the 5 different advisory political organs, including the personal chancellery, the Council of Ministers, and then need to write all out. Council of Ministers, the Committee of Ministers, the Senate, and the Council of State. Okay. This is in stark contrast to the communist. Oh no. Stark contrast to the communist system. Right, so stark contrast to the communist system, where none of those bodies existed, and instead, however, shared between 2 primary organs. Sovnarkom, I need to put the role, so who would preside over the Soviets, and the All-Russian Congress of Soviets, who would lead over the commissars. Okay, so that's my next bit done, or who would ensure that the commissars enforced laws across Russia. Or, in fact, the USSR would be a better phrasing. But all right, so that's basically the first part. So then I need to, so I've done my synthesis, I've done my evidence, and I need to explain. So I'm going to say, this is therefore a clear example of inconsistency between the 2 periods, as the Tsar was the sole decision maker in pre-1905 Russia, whereas power was shared between different organs in Bolshevik Russia. And then I'm going to say, I need to then introduce my next point of synthesis. So I'm then going to say another key difference in terms of central government, is the existence of a democratic political organ in Tsarist Russia. After 1905, with the introduction of the State Duma. This was a representative body. So I'm giving more evidence about the Duma. Okay. Right, that's that one. Okay. By the Tsar and his Council of Ministers. In contrast, there was no such democratic element in central government under the communists. Okay, so that's that. I've then put, although elections to Sovnarkom did take place from the village Soviet up, they were not truly democratic. So I then give my other piece of evidence and then need to explain. So this further proves that there was inconsistency as the communist system is fundamentally dictatorial, whereas the Tsarist system incorporated some elements, albeit limited, of democracy towards the end. Furthermore, the creation of the Duma is proof that the Tsarist central government was not even consistent, let alone Russian rule from 1855 to 1964. So that's the start of my analysis. I then need to consider a counter-argument. So although it could be said that central government in both Tsarist and communist Russia both sought to dominate society, this is not sufficient this is not sufficient to be labeled consistent, as all of the Tsarist institutions of central government were swept away with the rise of the Bolsheviks. Therefore, Russian central government changed significantly and was thus not consistent. Okay. So basically, if you see here, my points of synthesis are as follows. So the first one is this here. So this is my first point of comparison, guys, just here. And then my second point of comparison is this one. And then I'm obviously doing synthesis as well in terms of my connectives. But this is a better paragraph because I've then not only I'm doing 2 points of synthesis basically. And then my analysis, again, I'll highlight in that nasty color, is this bit here. This bit here. So this part is my analysis. You don't have to include a counter for every paragraph, but I would say you want to try as well. So the rest of it is either explanation, evidence, or other little bits of synthesis, such as this part here. Okay, so that would be another bit of synthesis. Where else have I used? So stuff like in contrast as well. Those kind of things. Okay, so that's basically that one. And then we're on to the final paragraph, which is going to be on local government, which should be the smallest one. Okay, so similarly, there was almost no consistency with regards to the system of local government in Russia between 1855 and 1964. Firstly, so this I'm going to give my first point of synthesis. So firstly, the Russian village went from being ruled by a multiplicity of institutions ranging from the Mir to the Zemstvo and Duma after, remember that's not the state Duma, is different, after 1861. Whereas in communist Russia, there was only the Soviet, which was the principal form of local governance. All other forms of governance had been removed, proving inconsistency in the structure of local government throughout the period. Okay. Secondly, so this is my first bit of synthesis here. No, not there. What am I talking about? No, it is there. So that's the first bit of synthesis. So I'm talking about multiplicity of institutions, and then the comparison is there was only. I'm using words like whereas. Okay. So then I say, secondly, the types of people who held power in local government. Local government changed. So here, what I'm going to do is, this is my second point of synthesis, so I'll highlight it accordingly. So I'm then going to start talking about who holds power in the Mir and so on. So I'm then going to talk about the fact that the Mir was run by the village elders, namely peasants who worked alongside or for the nobility, who owned the land, while the Zemstvo was run by the wealthy landowners and townspeople. I'm then going to say this was in contrast to the village Soviet, which was dominated exclusively by Bolshevik party representatives. This change in personnel. So it's clear evidence of there being a lack of consistency in terms of local government. Okay, so I'm being a little bit low on the ground in terms of evidence for communists there because there isn't actually much to say for the Soviets, right? It's basically they're now dominated by Bolshevik representatives. Okay, so then I'm going to say I've done my explanation there as well. More synthesis there as well. And then I'll just quickly do my analysis. So although it could be argued that peasants continued all my life, continued to play an important role in local government. For example, the Kosniks. So those are basically the collective farm peasants, were peasants from the kolkhoz who served in the Soviet. This is not sufficient proof of consistency, as their role had clearly changed. Under the communists, the Soviet was a vehicle for central government to enforce their own laws and rules, whereas local, during the Tsarist period, the local government was given more flexibility by Alexander II, who delegated power. Consistency. All right, so just to help you out, this bit in red is my point sentence. I then have here in blue is evidence. I then have this bit is evidence as well. I then have this bit, which is evidence. I then have this bit, which is evidence. And then I'll just show you the explanation. So explanation is this part. And then I've got that here as well. Okay. And then the analysis and the counter argument is here. Like I said, you don't have to include a counter, but I always recommend to do so. And then we're now some conclusion. So in conclusion, the style of government remained consistent in a very limited way. We'll say something like that. So what I want to do now is I now want to outline what I've argued. Okay. So I will say, admittedly, and we consider ideology first of all. So the ideology of autocracy had many shared features. So even now, I'm still doing synthesis. Ideology, including a desire for centralized and concentrated power and little tolerance of opposition. Then I'm saying something like, that said, the style of government in practice changed considerably in terms of central government and local government. None of the institutions of central or local government that existed before 1917 continued under the communists. Central government went from the Tsar having complete power to a system of power sharing between different Bolshevik organs. Oh, my life, my spelling has gone to poo here. Right, there we go. Although this did increasingly become concentrated under the rule of Stalin. Furthermore, local government was radically transformed from diverse and powerful under the Tsars to weak and monotonous under the communists. So what I mean by that is the local government went from being the Mir and the Zemstva making all these key decisions to then the Soviets just basically doing everything that Stalin said, marking a clear change. Therefore, the style of government was of limited consistency during the years 1855 to 1964. Okay, that is basically it. So in the conclusion, I'm just recapping everything that I've said throughout the essay. I'm not going to break that down because basically just do a recap of everything you've done. So the conclusion should be easy to write. If you've been switching your argument throughout the essay, then the conclusion will be tough. But basically, the key points, guys, are if I just go back to here. So you've got your three different themes. You introduce your theme. You give a point of synthesis, so a point of comparison. You give then evidence for the czars, evidence of communists. You then give another point of synthesis, so another comparison, then give an example from the czars, example from the communists. You then need to explain after each point of synthesis and the evidence has been given, and then you need to then finish with an analysis and mini conclusion. So you can see there the paragraphs broken down. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to go and lie down now after that. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. And I'll see you all in the next video.